September 11th, 2001, a day in which many of us say we will never forget. That is no truer than here at the Muster Room podcast. We are joined here today with John Ryan from the Port Authority Police Department, retired from the Port Authority Police Department, as we overlook the September 11th Memorial and Museum, the beautiful Tower 1 behind us. This is part of our ongoing 9/11 series, a series which is not only extremely important to us here at the Muster Room, but it's probably our most viewed each and every year, which makes it even that more special. So I want to welcome in everyone who's watching on YouTube, everyone who's listening on Spotify or Apple Podcast. This is another episode, part of the 9/11 series, which is just so important. And John, what's interesting is that aside from the adults and the children here in the United States, who do you think is most? Who do you think wants to know more about 9/11 besides us here in the U.S.?
Well, on 9/11, 92 countries lost people. Mm-hmm. And there's not a person walking on the face of the earth today that have not been affected by the events of 9/11.
Right.
Either through the events and the attacks, or the security protocols that have been put in place, or as is the case there with our military and our partners that have sent troops to locations around the world there that terrorists had set up a foothold in.
So we've learned through all of our social media platforms that the United Kingdoms and for whatever reason, the Netherlands are the two countries that view our podcast and all of our social media content the most, aside from those outside of the United States. And every time we come here and we do live TikToks and Instagrams, we have a ton of viewers from the UK, the Netherlands, and also Australia. So we have viewers from across the world. As you just said, 92 countries were affected on 9/11. So without any further ado, let's jump right into this podcast. We are joined here, as I said earlier, with John Ryan from the Port Authority Police Department, previous chief of police for the department, previous detective lieutenant. You were down here at the Trade Center as a detective lieutenant, working the pile and essentially assisting with the investigation. So let's talk about, before we get into September 11th, let's talk about you as an individual, why you got into law enforcement, and how you worked your way up through the ranks of the Port Authority.
So, I attended John Jay College. I had an interest in law enforcement. I had family members, that influenced me growing up in South Brooklyn there, which was, back in the 60s and 70s there, was a pretty crime-ridden area there, there was a methadone clinic very close to where I grew up there, so seeing, the effects of that, but also having, the influence of family friends and that were police officers there, and actually, supporting the 72nd precinct at the time, if they had a response there as a result of the methadone clinic there, but or other police actions there at the time there, it sort of set that foundation for me there to want to be a part of that. And then I had taken a series of tests, and like a lot of people are experiencing today, I started to get called from every different department there, so trying to make up my mind as to which one I was going to take there. So I actually, initially got called by NYPD, went through that process there. And then just as, I was getting to the point there where I was going to have to make a decision there, I opted to pursue the Port Authority Police. So actually at one period of time there for a few days there, driving my background investigator crazy there. I was actually on both agencies. Now,
were you born and raised here in New York?
I was.
So did you know of the Port Authority Police Department before you started taking some tests?
I had not, but while I was in college there, a friend of mine there had gotten a job actually working at the World Trade Center as a guide in the observation deck. So he told me about it there, and I actually started to work there as a guide as well. And that's how I learned about the Port Authority Police Department. I had no prior understanding of them.
If you don't mind, let's explain to all the listeners what actually is the Port Authority Police Department, because so many people obviously think of New York City, NYPD, right? But little do they know that the Port Authority also plays a major part in, especially security down here at the World Trade Center, plus all the bridges and tunnels and airports.
So the Port Authority Police Department is actually the 26th largest department in the United States. That figure might have changed there because of the hirings there that we've done, to address the terrorist threats there that are real to all of our locations that we police. But the Port Authority Police Department, works within the shadows of the NYPD there, the 34,000 person police department there. So a lot of times they're, they get rolled into the NYPD by people that don't have a knowledge, especially if they're not from this area, or haven't had, a reason to interact with the Port Authority Police Department. And, sadly, in some ways, 9/11 changed a lot of that there. When we suffered the largest loss of any police department in the history of our country. We lost 37 police officers on 9/11. Our superintendent of police, our chief, captain, a lieutenant, a sergeant, and police officers from every command, with the exception, I believe, one. So that really, put us face to the Port Authority Police Department there. Sadly, in a lot of ways there, as we get further away from 9/11, a lot of that, understanding has sort of started to fade.
So at what point, if I read your bio earlier correctly, you were working more in the Times Square area prior to coming here to the Trade Center. So walk us through how you go from working in really Midtown New York to then actually making your way down here to the World Trade Center.
So at the time there, I had actually, spent the majority of my 22 years at that time there working in Times Square at the Port Authority bus terminal there, and played a significant role in working with the Times Square Business Improvement District there, and cleaning it up there in preparation for Disney coming into the area. And, we were really pretty proud of ourselves there because, when I attended that first meeting and they said Disney was coming, I actually joked, said it might look like Disney, but it won't be Disney there, because Times Square back in that was pretty much
It was a rough area back then.
A no man's land.
Yeah.
So, but under the then Mayor Giuliani there, and the management of the NYPD, and support from the district attorney's offices and federal agencies there, we were able to really turn it around and make it into a really safe area. And actually, that's what led up to me being here on September 11th. We were so successful in that there, both from, I had been a juvenile officer there at the highly acclaimed youth services unit there that the Port Authority Police run out of the bus terminal there. I had been a CPOP officer, dealing with the homeless and the hardcore homeless there, and the mentally ill. And then also a crime prevention officer, to work with the stores and other businesses in the Times Square area there to improve methods of protecting their products, but also their buildings. And then actually we had one lingering issue there that we were dealing with at the time, and it was a gang problem. Not too far from the Port Authority bus terminal is a runaway shelter called Covenant House. And back in that time there, the majority of the residents there at Covenant House were women, and a lot of them had come from the 5 boroughs. So what was happening was that they had a 10 o'clock curfew, and they would attract boyfriends and other friends from the 5 boroughs that would come and hang out with them there until they had to go in at their curfew, and then they would wind up committing crimes and assaults, in the Times Square area. So, and a lot of them were actually blood members, dealing drugs, but like I said, committing crime. So on September 11th, initially, I had been going back and forth with an undercover to address that gang issue. And the only day that was available for both of us was September 11th. And he had court, so I was going to come down here and meet him in court, and try to put together a plan to deal with the gang problem there. Not realizing, that it was my daughter's first day of preschool. And like a lot of people, my number one concern was to be there to support my daughter. But in the beginning, I actually, because she was attending the afternoon session, I still was determined to meet, given how much trouble we had finding a day that was good for both of us. And then finally, I succumbed to the pressure from home to not, because their thoughts was that if I came in there, I wouldn't make it back in time. But we were going to meet, like I said, at 100 Center Street, which is only blocks from here. And actually on that day, 3 of the court officers that worked that building actually responded here and were lost. And then I wound up canceling the meeting and initially taking the day off. And then I got a call that a plane had hit the World Trade Center.
So you're home when you
I'm
first
home,
get the first
yeah.
notification.
Mm-hmm. And then, like a lot of people, given how clear a day it was, I assumed that it was a small plane, and turned on the TV, only in time to see Flight 175 strike the South Tower, and realized at that point there that we were under attack. I then prepared and made my way in, initially to John F. Kennedy Airport there, and then from John F. Kennedy Airport into here, and when I arrived, both towers had come down, but then Building 7 collapsed into the street, and all of the things there that had been, things that I used for reference were gone, and I think. It took me, probably weeks to get over the fact that they weren't here. I mean, I kept thinking that it was had to be a bad dream. It couldn't be that both towers were gone and the other buildings were impacted.
Yeah. So I remember I was 11 years old on September 11th. I was in the Long Beach Middle School when we were notified by our gym teacher that 2 planes had struck the World Trade Center. Like yourself, I thought, 2 small planes. Our middle school and our high school, especially the high school, overlooked the Trade Center. We're only about 30 miles from downtown Manhattan, and we were able to overlook that day. Beautiful, clear, sunny day, and you could see the towers every day. Especially on a day like that. And like you just said, I remember the days after 9/11, after the smoke finally cleared. Just having that big gaping hole in the sky that you were just never used to. So it was definitely something that I think probably many of our listeners probably remember.
Yeah, no, because it was such a perfectly clear day, the line of sight, was significant, and I'm sure a lot of people have that image, see it in their memory there of the towers and the smoke billowing from the towers, prior to the collapse. But again, the unknowns. It's like nothing that I had ever experienced, nor had a lot of people. It's a situation there where you're trying to formulate a plan and process what you're seeing, but there was just so much for you to process there. You know, and then the other thing was, trying to find people that you knew, and it wasn't until finally, later that day, that we some of us came together, and it was as a result of two retired Marines that had come down here, like a lot of people, to help, and during their process of going through the site, they heard what they thought was a person yelling, and came and got us, and it turned out to be originally 3 Port Authority police officers, Dominic Pizzullo, John McLaughlin, and Will Jimeno. And then during the time that they were trapped, and Dominic was not, but he wouldn't leave their side. It was a secondary collapse, and a chunk of concrete struck Dominic and killed him.
We had the honor of having Will Jimeno on this podcast about 2 years ago, and he told us a story, extremely emotional. It's an unbelievable story of survival. And then we had Scott Strauss come on right after him, and we had them both in the same room at the same time. Scott Strauss being the NYPD ESU officer, one of the NYPD ESU officers that ended up saving his life and pulling him from the rubble. It's unbelievable stories.
Yeah, we we expected to find and we're hoping that we were going to find a lot of people alive. The fact there that we found Will and John, gave us hope that we would find others there. And they were in a very tough spot there. And it was part of the reason why Dominic wouldn't leave them. I guess there were fires around them, especially in John's case there, he was very, unable to move, and through the efforts of, the PAPD people, the NYPD issue officers there that, put themselves in harm's way, and the FDNY, SOC people that helped in extricating them out of there, and Will came out first. His leg was very badly injured there, but John was in, very, very bad shape there. From the impact and the crushing of his legs there, his muscles started to break down, and it started to impact his organs there. So, there was even thought at the time there that, of amputating his legs, but that, they didn't think he would survive. So, when they both got out, and then were transported up to Bellevue, when we went to Bellevue, an image that'll stay with me forever, is that was that of John there. Because of the compression there, they had to cut his legs there to relieve the pressure, but hooked them up to an IV, and they had these big mats underneath to capture the blood there. It looked like a slaughterhouse there. And they, again, contemplated amputating his legs. And, again, they didn't think he would survive. So over the next several days there, they kept revisiting that. But then they detected a pulse in his ankle, and they decided there that they would try to, support him without, removing his legs there. And, after the last count was 70-something operations there.
Wow.
It wasn't too long ago there that he got to walk his youngest son down to, his graduation.
That's amazing.
So, but, the downside of that was that, unfortunately, there, other than a secretary for the Port Authority, a woman by the name of Giselle, we did not find any other people alive. There was a group including a then police officer, Dave Lim, firefighters, and civilians there that were evacuating the building, and they were coming down a staircase there. And in the course of them evacuating there, they came across a woman that was not very mobile and actually was telling them to go on. And some people did go on, but the majority of the group opted to stay with her. And shortly after that, the tower collapsed. So the people that were above them were killed. The people that were below them were killed. The people that were in that pocket survived. And out of the group, only one of them, suffered a broken arm.
Wow.
And they actually, they actually thought they had died because, but then as the dust cleared and they could see sunlight, they were able to make their way out, But other than those groups, the Secretary, Giselle, John and Will, there were no other survivors.
Yeah, as an emergency manager, someone who I have a degree in emergency management, one of the topics we discussed, obviously September 11th, and the issues of self-dispatching, especially when it came to ambulances and medical staff. So millions of dollars were sent down here to the Trade Center the hours and days after the collapse that essentially went to waste. And there were hundreds of ambulances that self-dispatched from not only here in New York, but surrounding states that all came down here thinking that there would be patients to transport. And as we all know, unfortunately, there just really wasn't. And all the hospitals were ready to start receiving trauma patients. Obviously, there were a few. There was more than a few. There was many that ended up surviving pre-collapse. But post-collapse, there really were not many survivors at all.
Most of the people that sought medical attention there were as a result of being impacted by the cloud of pulverized concrete and other building components there that filled the air, and covered them. So you had a lot of breathing, and respiratory issues there. But from a standpoint of resources there, not only medical but fire resources there and police, being so close to New Jersey, Connecticut there. The tri-state area, is fortunate in that, probably out of all of the country, if not the world, we have a lot of resources there. I know a lot of the Long Island volunteer fire departments, sent equipment, and personnel, but realizing there that it was creating, a bigger issue by having it all come here, we then wound up setting up the Javits Center, as a response location there, and nobody should have at that point there been self-dispatching to the area. We also, we had outpouring of support beyond the first responders there, but tech people and construction people and people that just thought they had the greatest idea that would help us. And a lot of them sent their equipment, and we wound up using like 3 floors of the World Financial Center to house it there in case there was a determination made there that it would provide some support to the mission.
So at the time of the actual collapse, you were a lieutenant at the time?
I was, yep.
You were a lieutenant, okay. So after the actual collapse, what was it like getting the call from, I assume, the higher up saying, hey, John, you're going to be in charge of this? What was the following days, weeks like, and what did you do?
And again, there, it seemed like, we worked continuously for 24 hours there, but, at some point, and it's sort of foggy when, I returned to my command, which was 42nd Street, and then, the following day, met there and, was dispatched down here with a group of officers there. And we were still very, unsure as to how many people and who had been lost, as was all of the other agencies, the FDNY, the NYPD. So then we started to try to, do a roll call and see who, was missing. So then, having lost the chief and the superintendent there, And the other command staff that had been actually present here during the collapse of the two towers there was still dealing with the trauma of that. Then Inspector Joe Morris, who was at that time there, the commanding officer of LaGuardia Airport, was tasked with being the incident commander. So we responded here. We actually set up a command post at Manhattan Community College there. And then once we had all of our personnel on site there, along with all of the equipment that we needed to access the site, we broke people up into teams. And it was at that point there that Joe Morris assigned me as the day tour commander of the rescue recovery operation, and another lieutenant, Bill Keegan, as the night commander of the rescue recovery operation, along with several other lieutenants there, Mark Winslow, Ed Moss, we then, broke the recovery teams up, into 6-person teams with a sergeant and myself, and then we would, respond in and conduct search and rescue and recovery in different areas there. But then, again, for an accountability standpoint there, we set up a joint command post there with FDNY, NYPD on West and Vesey Street there. So we actually, there was one of 4 command posts that we had in the beginning there. We broke the site up into 4 separate sectors there. And then, the teams would then be dispatched jointly, from those command posts there. Then we, working with some of our federal partners, FEMA, the urban search and rescue teams that had, it was the largest deployment of the urban search and rescue teams in the history of our country there. There were 27 teams that were dispatched here. Wow. But, taking a page out of their book, we began to create an incident action report and plan, that was a unified plan, that represented the Port Authority Police, the NYPD, and the FDNY, and it included the commanders' contact numbers, and tasks to be performed. And in addition to that, there we met twice a day, once in the morning to go over what we had accomplished the day before, and then again in the afternoon to put together what we hope to accomplish in the next 24 hours.
Now, how long into the operation did you guys figure out that this was no longer a rescue operation, but more of a body recovery and then just cleanup more than anything?
So, as many incidents as, jointly all of the agencies had dealt with there, we were basically reliant on the urban search and rescue teams to help us with that. So we based it upon earthquakes and other events around the world where people have been trapped, and a 14-day period was identified as the longest that had gone in any of those other prior incidents there, whether it be a hurricane or a collapse earthquake, was the longest that they had found somebody that had survived. So, that was our initial, benchmark. We kept hope alive, until we got to that 14-day mark there, and not seeing or getting any reports of life, either, through some type of communication there or noise. That was pretty much when it evolved from a rescue to a recovery operation.
Right. And then how many days did the Port Authority operate down here until the last beam was finally removed?
So, the Port Authority Police Department was here prior to 9/11. They've been here, since the World Trade Center site was established there. It's World Trade Center site is the Port Authority police jurisdiction. So they had been here and, actually experienced, an attack here prior to 9/11, on February 26, 1993 there, when 6 people were killed and 1,003 people injured during a terrorist attack in an explosion with a van in the lower parking garages there. That explosion actually damaged the Port Authority police station that was located at that time in the lower level, of the Trade Center complex. So they were, very familiar with, so they were here before. To answer your question, they were here before 9/11. They were here on 9/11. They were the first, people to respond to the attacks. And when the towers came down, losing 37 people, 37 police officers, we also lost, a total of 84 Port Authority employees, including, a number of our civilian partners there, our executive director, so, and also when the North Tower collapsed there, it again, took out our police station, and, to answer your question there, we were here for the entire duration. Unlike the FDNY and the NYPD that rotated their people through, we maintained the same people here for the entire time of the rescue recovery operation.
Yeah, I was referring to how long did it actually take to actually, from the minute the towers collapsed to the minute the last beam was removed. How long was that process?
So it was 9 months that we were here. From September 11th to June 8th was the last day. But for the official end of the rescue recovery operation, back in March of 2002, myself, then Mayor Bloomberg, Sal Casano from FDNY, Joe Esposito from NYPD, John Odermatt from OEM. We did a walkthrough of the site, trying to determine, when we could declare the end to the rescue recovery operation. And what we did was we estimated, based on the number of trucks that were removing material from here, and we then had the engineers do an assessment as to how much material was left that needed to be sorted through there for remains, and we were able to come up with the date of May 30th as the final day ceremony. And once we did that there, other things came into play, and we then determined that we would hold 2 final ceremonies. We would hold a ceremony on May 28th. That would be a workers' final day. And that was the day that we cut down the final beam, prepped it for the May 30th ceremony there. That would be the official end of the rescue recovery operation.
So 9 months, you have the final ceremony. What becomes of your role after that?
So at that point there, I transferred out to John F. Kennedy Airport. I became our emergency service lieutenant out there. The lieutenant that was out there, Kevin Hassett, that was our emergency service lieutenant, who was a very instrumental person in creating the emergency service unit there. Was retiring. Him along with another Lieutenant Michael Murphy there, that were really, the backbone of, reorganizing the Port Authority Police after the losses of we occurred here on 9/11. So I in that role there, I also was overseeing, over the course of the 9 months there. The engineers had identified a number of things there that they wanted to have preserved. And when we came across those things there, I would let them know, and then they would be transported out to a hangar out at JFK Airport, where they were then sorted through, in contemplation of which items would be used for inclusion in the museum here, but also which items would then also be distributed to other museums and other agencies around the country and around the world that wanted a part of the World Trade Center. So I interacted with the museum people that had been hired to complete that task, and then the final column, which was also brought out there, had been placed in a zero humidity tent to preserve it there, and then also to document every inch of it there. Again, in contemplation of it being returned here for use within the museum. So, I'd have daily interactions with people that were either, coming to view those items there, and then in 2009, even things as significant as those beams were considered evidence. So before they could be distributed there, a judge had a rule that they could be used for other than evidence there. So they had been completely documented there, and in 2009, those things started to get transferred to agencies and other government entities that had requested steel. The final column was gone over, and a lot of the things that had been affixed to it there or painted onto it there or written onto it there were done so while it was exposed to the elements there. And, the materials that they used wasn't really intended to withstand the rain and the other impact. So they had to go over it there. They had to affix magnets to the pictures. They had to, apply different epoxies to some of the paint there that was peeling. But all of that in preparation for it to be returned and become part of the permanent, museum here. And then as part of that there, in 2009, I escorted the final column back here, and not knowing where in the 16-acre site it was going to be placed. When they lowered it down and I went down to watch and observe them secure it to the foundation, it was actually almost in the identical place where in February of 2002, we had recovered 6 of our officers and a woman in a stair chair that were in the process of being evacuated out of the North Tower when the tower collapsed on them,
Wow.
driving it into the lower levels there. So again, ironically, it being placed almost in that exact location there where we had recovered those people, was sort of and through no effort, we were cutting those columns there that had been part of the 2 portions of the towers that stayed after, that had also been considered early on as possibly being used as the memorial. We had to cut them into pieces there that fit on trucks so that they could be trucked out to the hangar. Again, through no effort, the column itself is 37 feet tall, and we lost 37 officers on 9/11. So when you go through the museum and the memorial, there are a lot of things there, a lot of common dates and a lot of things there that, lead you to believe there that there might have been a larger power that was, directing the placements of them.
Yeah, there certainly is. And I get that question a lot every time I'm down in the museum and I'm bringing tours through or friends and family. And a lot of people bring up that point that there was a higher power that was overseeing when all this was taking place. And, there's in the museum, you have that piece of steel that looks like a cross with the white sheath that's hanging across it, which was.
So, again, we're trying to fit, just from a recovery standpoint, 9 months of activity, into an interview. But, there's so many things there that, have, impact on people, just like, you bring up about that cross. It was that cross, there was a construction worker, by the name of Frank Silica, who came running out one day there. And when the North Tower collapsed, it created a crater in the center of Building 6, which initially used to house U.S. Customs and other federal agencies there. But as it collapsed, it sheared off all of the building components. It left behind those I-beams in the shape of a cross. And what was unique about that I-beam was that a piece of the aluminum shroud that was on the exterior of the tower, when it dropped, landed on one side of it there like a shroud.
Yeah.
So we got one of the iron workers to cut it, and we brought it out. And the existing footbridge that goes from this park over to Battery Park, over to Brookfield Properties, had a similar one. There was a north footbridge that connected the Building 6 to the Winter Gardens that was crushed down in a collapse. But the two concrete pillars that supported that walkway were still in existence there. So we cut that cross, we mounted it on the concrete pillar on the east side, and we held a ceremony. And then every Sunday after that, one of the on-site chaplains would hold a non-denominational prayer service there. And then when they wanted to excavate West Street there and reopen it there, we moved the cross from there up to Greenwich, and then from Greenwich over by St. Peter's. And then we moved it, once the museum was ready for it there, we moved it into the museum. And at that point, we got sued by an atheist group that didn't want it to come into the museum as a cross.
Wow.
But we were able to, through the efforts of Brian Jordan, who's a Franciscan brother and priest, we were able to defend that. That's what it represented for the 9 months that we were here, and we were able to succeed in not having that lawsuit.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear that, because it's more than just a cross down there. There's also, I've seen, there was Jewish symbols, there was Islamic symbols, there was, I mean, every faith is represented down there in the museum.
So, there's actually a New Testament there that was found encased in a piece of steel. It's open to one of the Psalms there. That's an eye for an eye. That beam that you referenced there. So over the course of the 9 months, we spent a lot of time there. When things slowed down there, cutting crosses, Stars of David, and other symbols out of the steel, to present to family members and to other people that had requested it there or were impacted by the events of 9/11.
Yeah.
So, just from the cross standpoint, that's what it represented. And that's what it represented to us. So there was no reason for it not to be in there. As a cross.
Yeah, and I'm a Jew, and I agree. I think that what better place for it to end up.
Yeah. And like a lot of things there, if you look closely, a lot of people that were here doing the rescue recovery operation signed it. And sadly, as a result of the exposures, a lot of those people have since passed away.
Yeah.
So it's more than just a cross. It's a memorial to those people and to the 2,753 people that were lost here, on 9/11.
Right.
So
let's transition to the last part of this podcast. I want to talk about your time with the special operations community. I know you have a very strong relationship with them. And now, did you start building this relationship obviously after 9/11? But were you chief of department at the time, or how did that all come into play?
So during the rescue recovery operation there, and during the America's response to 9/11, every unit, every group, every special operations command, that were deploying would come here, to see firsthand, the events that occurred here and the attacks. They would go to the Pentagon, or they would go to the field in Shanksville, to see the remnants of Flight 93. But they would also come here, in taking them through and explaining things to them there. Relationships that I had with the Special Operations Command, prior to 9/11 there, that date all the way back to the 93 attack there, just continued to, develop there. And, I have now, lifelong friendships there that developed out of that there, with, the horse soldiers, who were, primarily, Army Green Berets, the Navy SEALs community there that, successfully carried out, missions there, ultimately there to take out, Osama bin Laden, on May 2nd there, in 2011 there. And,
Where were you on May 2nd, 2011, when you got the word that Osama bin Laden was killed?
So, prior to May 2nd there, and having that community there and having supported the SEAL community there, in various operations there, I had also arranged for them to receive. So when the exterior portion of the World Trade Center, the towers there, it started out as a single column that started out from the foundation, and when it got to the mezzanine level, it branched into a trident-shaped steel that went up the entire 110 stories. There were two portions of the towers that stayed standing after the collapse there, and it sort of represented the resilience. But to remove them, to complete the rescue recovery operation, we had to cut them there. And when we cut that portion there that went from the single column to the trident-shaped, it really was in the shape of a trident. And knowing that that is a representative of their command, I was able to arrange with their, help for them to get one of those tridents, and then, it became the centerpiece of their memorial, for SEAL Team 6. And, in 2011, not knowing how things were going to play out there, they had invited me down there for the dedication of that memorial to be held over Memorial Day weekend in 2011. And then in preparing for that there, and having constant communications with them, I then was notified there that they had carried out, a Neptune spear, and that Geronimo had been killed in their actions there. So it made that dedication that much more significant.
Absolutely.
And when I went down there for the dedication there, the majority of the people that I were friends with and knew were still deployed on that mission. I wound up spending it with a different group for the dedication there. And then I left and they left, and they were deployed to Afghanistan. And then on August 6th, a number of them were killed in Extortion 17, when a Chinook helicopter was shot down.
Yes.
So, both for myself and, for the SEAL community, we went from the sadnesses and the losses of 9/11 and their response, to the attacks that, wound up costing a number of them their lives, along with, the entire global war on terror there that has cost the lives of over 7,000 U.S. military personnel and injured over 53,000. So you went from, the sadness and the losses of 9/11, to the final elation there that they were able to kill bin Laden, right back to the sadness, losing that many special operations people in one event, was precedent. And, again, dealing with the Gold Star families there, one of the things there that, really established and made those relationships, lifelong relationships there, is that, over the course of time from September 11th, 2001 until right to this present day, whenever, families would come here of military personnel that had been lost, Gold Star families there, we would take them in, especially when Tower 1 was under construction. We would take them in to the highest floor that had been completed, and we would have them sign the wall. doing that, assured that, they would have a forever presence here, at the World Trade Center, knowing the sacrifices there that their families had endured as a result of responding to the attacks here on 9/11.
Wow. Well, I myself, I've had the honor of actually signing the wall as well as some of the other members of Law Enforcement Officers Weekend and our team here. And I think, it's a testament to just America and how we will never forget those that we've lost. It's a testament that if you come here and harm us, we will do whatever we can to make sure that justice is served. I can remember where I was when we heard that Osama bin Laden had been killed. And I remember in particular seeing all of the news media covering members of the FDNY, NYPD, Port Authority, hugging, celebrating, cheering, that it felt like there was finally an end. It finally had come, like you said, full circle. It was finally what we were all waiting for all those years. And I think it's a good way to wrap up this podcast.
Yeah, the important thing there, beyond 9/11, is the events of February 26, 1993. It's important there because, like I said, there was 6 people that were lost on 9/11 and on the 93 attack. And not that anyone's life is any more important than any other life there. One of those people was a woman by the name of Monica Rodriguez Smith. Now, on February 26, 1993, very much like a lot of us, if not all of us, have always, experienced there. Her and her husband got up that morning. Monica was 7 months pregnant. They had already selected a name for their son. He was going to be Ed Jr. They had breakfast. Their world was perfect. Monica was going into work one last time there because her office mates were giving her a baby shower. She drove in. Actually, prior to leaving there, her and her husband, they kissed. His wife drove in, went into the underground garage, and was killed in the explosion of the van. And every year on the anniversary of February 26th, there we meet and we reflect on the previous years. And Ed Smith reminds me every year that like this past year on February 26th that his son would have been 32 years old this year.
Wow.
So it's the taking out bin Laden isn't the final act, but it just reinforces that saying that we have is that always honor and never forget.
Yeah.
On September 11th, amongst the people that were killed, aboard the flights, there were 8 children, the youngest of who were 2. Like Monica, there were 10 women that were known to be pregnant. If you walk around the memorial, you'll see their names amongst the 2,983 names listed by their name and their unborn child. And that's, the people that were directly impacted there, and that, is also, the 7,500 members of our military, their families, and the 53,000 plus military members that have been injured responding to it there. We'll always remember and never forget, the efforts that were put forth here, but also the people that were impacted and lost.
Absolutely. And that's why we do these podcasts. We've seen time and time again, unfortunately, as time goes on, the significance of September 11th seems to diminish to a lot of these children, young teenagers and adults. And that's why we have this social media platform. That's why we do these podcasts, is to make sure that for the younger generations, they need to understand what truly happened and how September 11th changed our world.
Yeah, no, you perform a very, if not the most important task, as mentors and of people who are the keepers of September 11th and other events there that have impacted our world. I'm told there that there's over 100 million people that have been born or were too young to remember the events of September 11th. when I mentioned to people about the 93 attack there, a lot of people have no recollection of it there, and are fascinated to learn about it there.
Right.
Sadly, in the days and the years after 9/11, if you went into bookstores, you could find numerous books there that had been created as a result of 9/11. You go into bookstores now, and you're take some effort there. You probably even have to order it there. So the education part of it there is significant. Because if you don't learn from the past, you're bound to make the same mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. John, it's been an absolute honor to have you here joining us today. I really hope that our listeners learned something. I'm sure they did. And we'd love to have you back if you ever want to do this again. We're now 24 years later. Yep. Next year being the big 25. So,
besides it being the 25th anniversary, it's the 250th anniversary of our country.
Right.
And like September 11th, and February 26th, sadly, in the global war on terror, there are now anniversary dates there that cover all 12 months of different events, different losses of military personnel, different terrorist attacks around the world, and events there that are important for us to reflect upon and remember. And the muster room, is front and center on doing that. So,
thank you. We're trying. We're certainly trying. And
I appreciate you having me here, and more importantly, I appreciate you wanting to maintain and continue the message of always remember and never forget.
Thanks. So that means a lot. On behalf of the entire Muster Room crew, we truly appreciate that, and we thank you for being here. So with that being said, we thank all of our listeners, our viewers. We appreciate it. Another amazing episode here at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum here at Liberty Park with John Ryan, the previous chief of police with the Port Authority Police Department, previous detective lieutenant, and then crazy, you actually go back and becoming a detective lieutenant after being chief of department. You just love being in law enforcement, and we truly support everything you did.
To stay focused on the terrorism part and specifically the events of 9/11. Not expecting that there were, you had the Chelsea attack, you had the West Side truck attack, you had the bombing at the race in New Jersey, you had the Boston bombing, dates there that now can fill up an entire calendar.
Yeah, well, you're the epitome of someone who truly wants to serve and protect and the thin blue line. So we thank you for your service as well.
I appreciate that.
All right, and with that, everyone, thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.